Hey, welcome back to Black Lotus, where we talk about all things strange and unusual. And today we are going to be talking about ghosts versus demonic hauntings, very different situations. And we are going to be joined by Wild Trees, our resident scientist, and Michael Roser, as well as the incomparable Lorilie Potin. But yeah, stick around. Conspiracy theories, the paranormal, UFOs, aliens, and all things strange and unusual. This is Black Lotus. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hi, Damian, Ralph, Wild Trees.
Hello.
Laura.
Everybody have a good week?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Fantastic. I can't complain.
Excuse me. I'm hoping it's not COVID. That's why I stopped in a good
Yeah. God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was just mentioning to Michael that I had a blowout of my car yesterday, and I have a little smart car, and there's no room for those like a spare tire, and so I had to actually call for a tow just because of a flat tire. It was really ridiculous, and now I'm out of a car until tomorrow. That sucks, you know. But yeah, fun Thanksgiving. But
I'll say.
Anyway, so Ralph, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Yeah. So today we are going to be talking about hauntings versus demonic entities, and as you all know, they're very different things. There's even in my opinion, there's a difference between a typical haunting and like poltergeist activity. I think. Yeah, I mean, I've heard, I don't know this for certain, but I've heard that poltergeist activity is often attributed to perhaps somebody in a household causing mischief, that seems to be paranormal, but it's not actually ghosts. I lived in a haunted house when I lived in Minnesota, and it was very haunted, but there was no poltergeist activity. But, we did see and hear a lot of weird stuff, awful stuff, actually. But then, like, both Ralph and I have both experienced kind of poltergeist activity in other places. I mean, that place you lived, your mom's house when you were a kid, that was like horribly so. Crazy stuff. But Michael, I want to switch this over to you because I mean, I know you were into paranormal investigations. What did you think about all that?
So you're absolutely right that there is a defining difference between demonic possession of a space and perhaps just a ghostly resident. You bring up a good point saying that there's a possibility that it might be from the person that's there in the physical. I mean, given how large our energy is. Many years ago, my father told me a story of when he was in college, and I think he had a test that he didn't do well on, and he was very upset, and he came home. And when he got into his room, he kind of did one of these numbers, just in absolute anger, and a picture ended up falling off the wall. Now, at the time, he didn't think much of it. Okay. Many years later, several decades, actually, he had a reading, and the reader said, "Hey, listen, do you remember this incident?" He said, "Well, yeah, actually, I do." She said, "You had actually moved that object with your energy." Sometimes this happens where the energy is just unbridled based on our emotions. And, if that was something that he clearly did it unconsciously, but was made conscious of it later, if that's just one little sliver of what we're capable of in the unconscious sense, can you imagine what we can do in the conscious sense? So to bring it back to your question here regarding the paranormal, I think you have to go case by case and really take into account what's there, the people that are involved, and perhaps the location as well, to determine if it's an actual haunting of some sort or if it's perhaps the person their field in some way affecting the environment around them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What do you think, Ralph?
I think there's definitely a difference between the two. And
like you said, I had that poltergeist experience, and then we saw another white ghost in my house, and they were totally two different things.
Yeah. Hi, everything UFOs. Hi, Julie. How are you? Julie says that she works in a haunted asylum, and I've talked to her. She's actually been on our podcast before, and we talked about that. And yeah, there's some kind of creepy stuff going on there. But Wild, let me ask you: Have you ever had any kind of poltergeist or haunting activity around you?
Yeah, so I had one incident that you could classify as poltergeist because I had a physical activity manifest itself, and it was invisible. But I think it was ultimately a positive experience. It only happened once. But actually, this door right here, this door was involved. So I was 10 years old, and I was going to close that door, but I felt an invisible hand kind of try to stop me from doing it. It felt just like a hand. It was very forceful, but it wasn't painful. And then I ignored it because I was just like a 10-year-old kid freaked out by an invisible hand. And when I closed that door, my mom's like pinky finger was like slammed in the door, and she had to go to the emergency room. It was a really traumatic experience.
Wow.
So yeah, this was a physical manifestation of something invisible, and it seemed like it was trying to prevent something negative from happening. So that's the closest I've had to one of these experiences.
My personal opinion is that, when we're not really talking about poltergeist, we're talking about hauntings. I want to say that these spirits just want to be known, or perhaps like, in the house that I lived in Minnesota, it was such a traumatic thing. It was a double murder suicide by the dad, and he killed his son and his wife. Come to find out later, and I think the memory goes on after death, and it's just repeated all the time. And I don't think that these ghosts are necessarily bad things necessarily. I mean, they're not there to intentionally scare you. On the other hand, those of you who may not know who Lorilie Potin is, she was on Paranormal Travel Channel's Paranormal Survivor, and she went through something awful with a demonic entity. Lorilie, hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine, thanks. Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Lorilie has been on with us 2 or 3 times between here on our Black Lotus YouTube channel, as well as our Paranormal News Network podcast over at Podbean. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, Lorilie. Go on.
No, that's okay. And we're really grateful to the opportunity that the Travel Channel gave us to share a bit of our story. But this went on for close to 11 years.
Oh, man.
Experience this activity besides ourselves. Wasn't just a demonic entity. And I'm still not fully convinced that it was demonic, whether it was just pretending, but whatever it was powerful. It threw my husband 15 feet across the kitchen. I've got pictures of bites, scratches, burns. Everything in our life was practically ruined by this, like everything. And it all started with a dream. So I think there's definitely a difference. I'm a nurse actually, but I'm off on disability, so permanently, but I also work as a psychic medium and an energy healer and teacher, spiritual teacher. I was just doing a reading today, and I was explaining this to the person that, sorry, coughing here, that, think if you died really traumatically, really quickly, like, really tragically in a car accident, or possibly, somebody shot you, you didn't realize you were dead. Because we hear a lot of this activity stirring up when people start doing renovations. So think about it. You don't realize you've passed away. So where are you going to go? Back to your house. You're probably trying to talk to people. Nobody's talking to you. You can't understand why. And then all of a sudden, these strangers move into your home. And you're like, what do you do? They can't hear you. You're going to start doing stuff to make sure that they know you exist, and then start tearing your house apart. That's when we see stuff get crazy. It's like The Sixth Sense, almost, that movie
Right.
with Tom Hanks, right? Because we didn't know till
Bruce
the
Willis.
end that he was dead.
Yeah.
Well, Lorielle, you mentioned that you aren't fully convinced that what you had dealt with was necessarily demonic, although what you described seemed to be very characteristic of that sort of behavior. If in your mind you're thinking this wasn't a demonic entity based on what you went through, what do you think it might have been?
Well, the thing is, there were 4 main entities in the home. How this started, when I hurt my back, it was a work-related back injury. I was almost in bed for 20 years. And
Wow.
get up, I had to keep busy making all kinds of little crafts. And when I could get out, people in my city here in Thunder Bay, it's northwestern Ontario, we're about 6 hours north of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And what happened was they wanted to carry my merchandise. They didn't want any compensation. And at that time, the movie The Secret had just come out. And my first husband and I at the time had watched it. And I remember saying to him, this is crazy. Like, nobody wants a cut. They're going to give me the full price. They'll put it in their store. This is nuts. Nobody does stuff like this. And I remember him saying, my first husband, well, maybe it's The Secret, the law of attraction. And I kid you not, probably that night or it was a day after. And I remember this dream like it happened 20 minutes ago. I've said it many times with Ralph and Damian on their shows. That there used to be, when I lived in the old house, there used to be a tree in the front yard. And I was out in the front yard in this dream. And I can tell you exactly what this guy was wearing. He was sitting up in the tree. He was wearing, and I always say I'm not a really, high maintenance kind of person, but you could tell it was very expensive. It was a dark charcoal gray pinstripe suits, white shirt, black tie, and his hair was all slicked back black to about here, neatly groomed. He had this black goatee and mustache that all joined, very neatly trimmed. But as I kept looking up, you could see the skin. His skin was this sickly kind of whitey green color. And then I saw his eyes, and his eyes were pure black, and then they'd go to flame. And it started with him saying, hello, Lorilie. You see that little business that you have? That's nothing. If you agree to follow me, I'll give you wealth. I'll give you fame. I'll give you anything you want. A dream. It's not, I can't repeat exactly what I said, but it wasn't radio friendly, we'll say, and basically told him to leave. And then I asked him, who are you? And he identified himself as demonic, told me his name, spelt it for me. And again, much more emphatically in the dream, I screamed at him, get out. I didn't know anything about these kind of things, except some of the things we'd experienced with palliative care as a nurse, right? And then I remember him looking down at me with this really mocking look and wagging his finger like this. Oh, no, 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 no. Every time you see a crow or a raven, you'll know who this is. And I woke up in a sweat, crying, shaking. I rarely ever cry. I was raised Roman Catholic. I no longer identify with that, so I'm definitely not an expert on demonic entities, but I've never heard this name before. It's a four-letter name. And fast forward probably 10 years, 12 years from then that happened. This is almost 15 years ago. People had been contacting me to see, is there anything, do you know anybody that might help me with what's going on? And somebody had given me this name that they had been, they said this thing was trying to get them to invoke it in the dream. I said, well, I'm not an expert, but I'll take a look for you. And I just about fell off my chair because right there on that page, looking up for this person was the exact spelling, the animal form, everything that I've been told in this dream. So yes, it identified itself as demonic. We also had a shadow man or hat guy. It's too bad Heidi wasn't here. Heidi's a good friend of mine, Heidi Hollis.
Yeah, we meant to have her on this week, but she had some holiday stuff she was still doing with family. So we'll probably have her on next week.
Yeah, because she's the one that first coined that phrase. Then we had a female shapeshifter that used to take my form. And I've never hit anybody, but used to hit my husband. Like he'd be up at 3:00 in the morning making a sandwich. And one time he came flying down the stairs. You just come upstairs and hit me twice across the back, really hard twice. And I said, why would I do that? First of all. Second of all, I haven't moved. Third of all, you would have heard me coming up the stairs. I said, why are you asking me this? And he said, because again, his back was to the doorway, or he's facing forward, obviously making the sandwich. And all of a sudden he said, smacked him super hard on his left shoulder twice. And when he spun around, he said it was exact replica of me, right down to the same hair color, clothing, everything. And then the last one that we had, the main one, my guys named him the Shy Guy. If you ever played Super Mario, he looks like the Grim Reaper with the white hockey mask. I actually have a picture of him off of our security cameras because I started taking pictures. So, and people have asked me, why has this happened? I don't know. Only thing I can think, because sometimes there's a lot of people that have attachments and they don't realize that they do. And working very extensively in palliative care, I was a community visiting nurse, and I worked in one of the most dangerous low-income parts of the city. So a lot of murder, suicide, aggression, depression, drug use, alcohol use. So was there something there that just decided to follow me home? I knew the history of the land. We never really ever got any answers.
Well, that's something, Lorilie. Big Cat asked an interesting question. He says, did Lorilie call the demon into her life, or did it seek her out?
It sought me out. And that's a good question that they asked, because in the beginning of all this, I was actually quite offended when people would say, well, you must have done something to bring this into your life, or what was it there to teach you? And I wasn't open to that in the beginning. Now I am, because there's something that we can all learn from every experience that we have. And the one thing I will say, I wouldn't wish this on a blade of grass, let alone a human being. But I am grateful for what happened, because it's brought me to meet the people I have, where I am in my life now, and what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Chuck Bam said, yes, don't say the name. Does that invoke
No,
it?
I know well enough not to say it.
Yeah, that's if you think hard enough, I bet you could probably hear it. I already have an inkling, but it's not. I mean, when it comes to vibration and resonance, sometimes just avoiding that altogether, is a good thing. So
I've never released the name publicly, and I won't.
No, there's no need to. There's no need to. As long as you're good, you're safe, and things are copacetic with you, it's not necessary to do that. You can still share the experience without giving every little detail,
Well, there's too many people out there that have no idea what they're dealing with. I've had many people contact me after seeing the episode. One guy from Norway was begging me to give him it's like I ended up blocking him, and you could tell he had no experience with the paranormal. Like, I think people think this is like going to Disneyland. Let's have a thrill. Let's check this out. And they don't realize you don't control something demonic or that negative or dangerous.
Right. And I say that all the time to people at, like Facebook groups and that deal with UFOs and stuff like that. And people are saying, I would love to be abducted. I want to see a UFO. And I'm like, not what you're asking for. I mean, you don't want to be abducted. It's not a pleasant, it wasn't a pleasant experience for me. Keith Blanchard, who is usually on the show with us. And again, he had another deal he had to do the weekend. This is a tough week for everybody, but I mean, it wasn't a very good experience for me. And I'm just telling people, hey, you don't know what you're asking when you're asking for the paranormal to enter your life, because you don't know what's going to happen. You really don't. That's why, last week we were talking about the close encounter of the fifth kind, where you actually call them out, the CE5 thing. And I'm not so sure that I would ever want to do that. But I know a lot of people want to do it. I mean, that's Dr. Stephen Greer. He's into that, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like, people see stuff on TV, like our episode. That's not how things happened. I realized they were trying to tell a story. They amalgamated a lot of what we were filmed for actually 6 hours, and we had no say in what happened. So everything that we said was the truth, but they were exciting episode because Dell, my partner, or hubby, I guess I call him now, we're common law, he almost died. It was quite after that, one of us had to stay awake all night long while the other three slept. It ended up was he didn't even remember. It was like he was seizuring in the bed next to me. It wasn't his voice, but I was yelling at him and saying, Del, and I literally, I don't even know how I did that because I've got a bad back, but again, energy, right? When we're not thinking about it. And I'm shaking him, and all of a sudden he wakes up and he's choking. I kid you not. It was like black ectoplasm coming out of his mouth. He said he felt like his ribs were breaking. After that, one of us had to stay awake because I have a son with autism, severe autism, and my other son, he couldn't stay in the house longer than 24 to 48 hours. He'd start to get really easygoing kid, no problems. He'd start to get really, snarky and angry, really depressed, wanted to commit suicide, all kinds of stuff. Like, I'm so glad that we're out of that house. Like I said, I lost everything, but I tried to look at it as a gift. And the whole neighborhood was affected.
But it didn't follow you to the new place.
Well,
right?
The interesting thing is nothing like at the old house. But, I understand too that one thing knows who you are. They just don't, and you move and they forget who you are, right? But it was actually kind of comical. Our dog is a German Shepherd, and he had this floppy blue llama. And Del and I were in the hallway it was right after we moved in. I think we were putting something together. And then we both, out of the corner of our eye, I wish I would have had a camera, because that's why I take so many pictures, because how are you going to prove it? This, right. I kid you not, stood up and took 2 steps and fell over. And Del goes, "Did you just see what I said, the llama?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "No friggin' way." So it was things like that. What really happened, though, is that somebody reached out to me from Tennessee that actually works with demonic entities, not getting rid of them, working with them. I had him on my podcast. He was fantastic to listen to. He actually started his career out as a pastor and then really got into Eastern way of life, Eastern beliefs. And he looks at it as the scales of a dragon, if you will. He's got a whole theory on it. He's written a lot of books and things like that. And he was the one that contacted me. And distance-wise, he said he asked for permission if he could deal with it. And I said, if that's what you want to do, go ahead. I said, I don't want to hear. And I'll knock on wood, but things have been pretty quiet since. That was about a month or 2 ago.
Yeah, but it certainly hasn't been violent like it was before.
No.
Yeah. That's why I personally think it was some sort of evil entity there, and not so much a ghost or a spirit or anything.
Oh, no, it wasn't a ghost. No, definitely not. And again, it could very well, I mean, it identified itself as that, but as I understand it, and again, do we ever really understand demonic entities? So as I understand it, they're tricksters, they're liars, right? Why are you going to tell me what your name is and how to spell it and your animal form, and then I find it in writing how many years later, on a demonic webpage, looking up something for somebody else.
Yeah,
I'll put this out there very quickly, and then I'd like to hear what Wild Trees thinks about this subject as well. Keep in mind that many indigenous people, years and years and years ago, in ancient history, they would actually, well, number one, they were aware of both the polarities in terms of the entities that exist. They were aware of the space that they might actually inhabit, and then they were also balanced enough that they were working with these energies in a very synergistic fashion. Whereas, wherever we are now consciously and energetically, we've obviously fallen out of that know-how, but there was a time that, we could actually point to and say that we were in balance with some of these forces that we would consider negative. And again, synergistically, we had these relationships. Wild Trees, what do you think, man?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to mention that I think that several things present themselves the same way in the paranormal, but they could have different causes. So we've mentioned, like demonic entities, a poltergeist, even UFO abductions and ghosts. These things can present themselves very similar, but they could be different causes. I also think, like, for instance, like Bigfoot, just to stray off a little bit, there's a debate whether it's like a physical animal or whether it's like interdimensional or spiritual. I honestly think it's all 3 or all 4. However many explanations, it's probably all of them mixed together. the same thing with alien creatures. I think some of them are probably from other planets. Some of them are probably from our planet. Some of them are probably from another time. Some of them are probably from another dimension. I think it's all of them. So in your case, like you thought it was a negative, a demonic entity with a history that's been around for a while. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was the solution for these problems. We've all been talking about negative things. So if anybody's watching this and perhaps in the future or currently they're suffering from something like this, it seems to be like just a lot of positivity, a lot of love is a good solution. Finding peace in your life. Usually these things happen and either you already have or it causes a lot of chaos in your life. And it sounds like you just need a peace with some problems. I've also heard people directly talk whatever's causing this and just make a deal with them. Just say, hey, let's work a deal here. I don't hate you, but I can't have this in my life. Mm-hmm. And then I did have a question as well while I was thinking about these topics. So in your case, it sounds like it was like, you and your husband and then your children were involved. A lot of these stories, there's always more than one person. So I'm wondering, is this more likely to happen with more than one person, or does this happen with just like one solitary individual? Let's say somebody lives by themselves. Are they likely to have these physical phenomenon? Yeah.
Good question.
Are you asking me, or are you?
I guess the group. I guess the group. My group. Yeah, the group question is: have you heard of it, or do you think these kind of physical manifestations will happen with single people, or is it usually a couple or a group of people?
I don't think it matters.
Both.
I agree. I don't think it really matters. I think, if they're going to show up, they're going to show up. It's kind of like what Lorilie was saying about ghosts. And if the death happens suddenly, they just go home and they don't really realize what's going on. And it doesn't matter who moves into the new house. I mean, they're going to experience something.
You have to put yourself in those shoes, right? If people can't hear you. Like if somebody walked through that door right now, Walters, and you're saying, "Hey, dude, who are you? Get that H out," and they're not listening. I mean, what would you do to stop someone, right? Can't call the police; they're not going to hear you, and you don't realize you're dead.
Yeah. I almost think it's easier when you're single and something haps upon you this way, because then you don't have to convince anybody else around you that it's there, Well, I mean, all tongue-in-cheek comments aside, I really don't think it matters. But I do think that there are definitely situations where one person may be more open to that sort of thing and attracting it even unconsciously. The other person's mixed in. But as soon as I start looking at a situation like that, I try to look at the bigger picture and think of perhaps there was an agreement at some point to have this experience, as negative as it might be. Again, coming back to the idea that the soul's benign in terms of what it decides on experience. It has no preference, okay? Which, again, would make sense as to why we experience both sides of the poles so intensely. You know what I mean? So, sometimes when you're looking at cases like this, you do have to bring that spiritual backing into it, because there are times where the attachment might be left over from something in a past incarnation, or there's a trauma that you have gone through that's still in your arc field that has attracted this sort of thing that, again, happened at another point or just happened in this life and you weren't aware of it at the time, the actual damage that it did. So you look at some things like portal work, where they're scanning your field to pull out the different areas that are open and closed in terms of portals, which directly correlate to what you experience in waking life. Healing yourself is the first and foremost thing you need to do before you even decide to step into this field in any kind of footwear, so to speak.
You guys are already aware of this, but we had a shadow person that hung out in our hallway here at the house. And I was talking to a spiritualist medium, and I told her about it, and she did a reading on it, and she found out she sensed that it thought that I was keeping it here as a prisoner. And she said, and so she says, the next time you see this thing, just call it out and say, hey, you're free to leave. If you feel that I'm keeping you prisoner, then that is not the case. And so I did that, and she said, send it love. And so I did that, and we haven't seen it now in months, maybe even so much as maybe 6 months. And so I think what you're saying, Michael, is that you need to have a good balance with all that stuff. So that brings me to a question for you, Lorilie. When you were going through all of this at the other house in Thunder Bay, I don't know if you're a very religious person, but did you happen to pray for protection?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You know what? I'm going to be facetious here, but people would hear this story or, make some comments because we've been on different shows, like, podcasts like this, and you get the ultimate comment, you need to get right with Jesus, or, the reason why this is happening to you is because you two are living in sin. You're not married. And, you get all kinds of stuff like that because people really believe what they see on TV. That's gospel. That's not how things happen. And so, of course, we prayed. But you're kind of leading me into what I was thinking about. You must have been reading my mind because we tried everything. We tried to get people to help. We tried to get people coming in. Every time we tried to get somebody, something would happen. They'd get ill. A family member would get ill. They get pulled in another direction. We realized it had to come from us being pulled together as a unit. And then I think if you understand the universe, the laws of the universe, you start realizing that everything is energy, including your words, your thoughts, and your emotions, which are most powerful. And so when you understand that something is lower vibrational, right? And if you raise the vibration in the house, and do that, you're no longer an energetic match. So the last couple of years, financially things didn't improve. There were still a few things, but the physical attacks really fell off. We weren't seeing, because Della is clairvoyant, so is my oldest son. And they wouldn't even speak to each other. They'd both tell me separately exactly what they'd seen. So we knew darn well. So I think it's so important that this is one of the things that can really, really help is understanding about energy. It made a lot of sense to me in my mind. One person can do it. Believe it or not, it's better if you can all do it in a household. But say you were asking about somebody living singularly, and when people say what's raising your vibration, I know you guys understand, but maybe for the listeners, it's doing things that bring in happiness, joy, getting outside, getting in nature, practicing gratitude, watching a funny movie, having a happy, well, now it's kind of hard with COVID, but having, friends over and having a good time, things like that. Or like you said, sending it love, sending these love.
Like you're sustaining your vibration when you do that. You're up at a high vibration and it's harder. Yeah, I could go on like that, but yes.
Yeah, I think you're very right about people who are stuck at home, self-quarantine for this COVID nastiness. And I think what's happening is when you're stuck at home like that, you lower your vibrations, and that attracts lower vibrations, I think.
Or the water. The water. I never even thought of this in the beginning, how much we're made up of water. Global collectively, there's so much fear, there's so much anger, there's hatred, there's all these low vibrational energies. And we've even seen experiments with the Japanese scientists with water, what happens when you send it love versus when you send it things like hatred or whatever. We're drinking water that's holding the vibration of all this, because I'm seeing so many people, and I'm sure you guys are, feeling stuck, feeling blocked, feeling depressed. I mean, it's just ripe for the picking right now. And it's so hard for people. I mean, this is a totally different life than what most people have ever experienced, and no answers for the future right now.
Yeah, it's awful, and I'm betting that people right now are seeing more ghost activity in their households, or poltergeist activity, or perhaps even like demonic hauntings, that sort of thing. But speaking of demonic hauntings, you kind of touched on this, but do you think that, again, you don't have to be a religious person to believe in demonic entities. And I don't think you need to be a religious person to believe in angelic energies. Do you think you could invite those angelic entities into your home as a protection?
Sure. I think you can.
Absolutely.
I work with Archangel Michael. That's why my show and my business is called The Angel Rock. It's because I work with the archangelic realm a lot and other entities as well, high vibrational entities. But I love crystals. I work a lot with crystals, and I love rock music, so I embraced it. That's who I called that. But absolutely,
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned
protection.
That's interesting. You mentioned Archangel Michael, because it was many years ago, and I was raised Christian most of my early life, obviously straight away from that, but still had some of these deep rooted thoughts that went along with it. And so I kind of rejected anything that had to do with saints and anything biblical. But for whatever reason, Archangel Michael's energy was just so large. Eventually I started working with his Legion of Light and, working with the swords that we have embedded in our arc fields and so forth. And ever since I did that, back when I was 19 or 20 years old, in the worst times that I've dealt with the most negative of entities, eventually it's his Legion of Light in him that I have to call on. Otherwise, I mean, I could just send off white light to some of these entities and it just pisses them off. But when Archangel Michael
does, like throwing as somebody
story.
Described it,
Yep.
A huge wasp nest at a 10,000-pound grizzly bear. That's what they told us in the beginning was happening.
Well said.
Yeah. Ralph, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I wanted to know from Wild Trees, you said that you had an experience with that door, and is that the only experience you've had in that house, or?
Yeah, the other experience, I'll mention a little one that I haven't mentioned at all. And one time I was like a kid and I was in the living room and I went to sleep listening to a Christian radio station, but then I woke up in the middle of the night and it sounded like satanic music was coming out of the radio.
Wow.
Or just like a bunch of satanic sounds. It was very unsettling. So I just turned it off. But then the other kind of bigger event was I was 19 and I was sleeping on the couch. And then I woke up and I thought I saw my two sisters, which were little kids, standing next to me, looking at me. And I thought it was odd that they would do that. But then I focused in and they turned out to be 3 little gray aliens, very typical looking gray alien. And then
Wow.
I wasn't paralyzed or anything. I did it did kind of look dreamlike, like the atmosphere around me, but it didn't seem like a dream, although it looked dreamlike. And then when these little gray aliens, they noticed that I was looking at them and that I was awake, they freaked out just like children and they ran away down the hallway. And then I just went back to sleep. And some of the things I don't think it is. I don't think it's sleep paralysis because I've had sleep paralysis and it's very different than this. It was never like this. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about aliens at all. Like I was a freshman in college. I think I was playing a lot of video games and I had a new girlfriend and I was doing my classes. So it wasn't like I was watching the X-Files or anything. It was just so odd. But that also happened in the house. So I'm wondering if they're somewhat related. Both those experiences are not really negative. The one with the door is very positive. The one with the aliens is just kind of odd and interesting, not really negative. So those are like 3 things that happened in this house.
That's funny. We hear a lot of reports of people saying that when they see these things, it's like they didn't realize that we were watching them or that we were there. And then the acknowledgement comes and then they did do one of these jump moves. I have a couple of different people that have had cases like that. I think that's so interesting that there's a possibility that, behind this curtain that they obviously can navigate that we're not totally aware of, that, they might not actually always be aware of our presence,
Right.
Well, and that brings me to another question for the group, and that is, do you, in your experience, people who have witnessed aliens, are they more likely to be in tune with spirits?
Absolutely, I agree that. I believe that.
Because I think that's the case with me and Ralph. Because we've experienced so many paranormal situations, everything from UFOs to aliens to ghosts, and I don't think that we have ever experienced like a demonic entity or anything negative necessarily, but yeah, I think that there has to be some sort of correlation there. What do you guys think?
Agree totally. The more that I've said I don't want to work with that kind of thing, with dark energies, that's what spirit seems to, I call spirit, or, who I work with over on the other side, I call it collectively spirit. I seem to get more and more people coming towards me that need that kind of help. I have actually seen somebody possessed live on a video levitating, and it scared the living crap out of me because I wasn't prepared. I mean, I knew this person not well, just happened to be in a group together, and she was at a very low point in her life, and her whole face changed, her demeanor. I mean, and it is just crazy. I could not make this stuff up, and wasn't even it was her voice, but it wasn't her. Just to look at her dogs, who she adores in normal life, the dogs were yelping and crying. I mean, it was crazy, some of this stuff. So evil exists. And the other thing, I have to agree with you 100%. I know you said that, Wild Trees, and I know you're going to add something to Dark Hour, but most people seem to have ET experiences, myself included. And I never went looking for the paranormal. It found us. I think it's with most of us.
Yeah.
Wild Trees?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Oh my God, let me see. What was I gonna say? Why don't you take it from here, and I'll think about it while you're.
Sure. So this is a hotly debated topic right now, whether there's a correlation between, ETs and the paranormal. And, we have to take it again, case by case. Keep in mind, too, that whatever veil that we've sort of installed on our consciousness to keep us from understanding and knowing the all every moment that exists within the moment, for our own experiential benefit. Okay. There are layers to that. So you're going to come across some people that have maybe 1 or 2 layers stripped off, and maybe they see auric fields or the occasional ghost. Another 2 layers from that, somebody sees full-fledged apparitions walking around. I mean, you're going to find different, varying degrees of that openness. Now, what happens when somebody comes in contact with an extraterrestrial or even the paranormal, okay, because I do think that these experiences in some way are synonymous on a lot of levels, is that it opens that person up, perhaps consciously, perhaps unconsciously, perhaps both, that you can never dismiss that something outside of yourself like this might exist, that you just happen to get that glimpse into the abyss, and you get that first look, and it's something that you can never forget. And then, that being the case, again, there's the unconscious aspect as well as the conscious aspect. Maybe consciously you don't want to go any further, but unconsciously or subconsciously, the doors are still open and experiences will still come to you. And, again, the way that you're thinking about it also attracts those as well. So it's up for debate still to see, if that's actually the case. But I think within some years, we're going to have a more definitive answer.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. That was one of the points I was going to make, is that if you just have one paranormal experience, it kind of just opens your eyes to this possibility. So you're more than likely to give attention to these kind of paranormal things.
Right.
It's possible that the paranormal happens to everybody all the time, but we just don't notice it or we ignore it. But once you have that first event, then it happens. And then the other thing I was going to say is that it seems like I have an idea that perhaps a lot of paranormal things travel together in groups because they seem to be from somewhere slightly different than what humans call Earth and consensus reality. These paranormal things seem to come from somewhere maybe adjacent, and so they may just hang out together. They may attach themselves to each other. For instance, like in science, if you ever have a big shark, the shark itself is one thing, right? But it carries with it like these other fish called remora, and these fish like stick on the shark and they suck on it. They clean it off, and then when the shark eats, it's really messy. And so these fish have adapted to eat all the little scraps. So in this example, let's say, UFOs are like the shark, well, then you're also getting those remoras, which could be poltergeist activity, or it could be some kind of secondary
I agree.
paranormal thing. Yeah.
Oh, good point. Very good point.
I just want to apologize, guys. Sorry. I don't know what it is. If it's me up here in Canada, if I end up speaking over you like I just did, I apologize because it seems like there's a pause because I'm delayed. I just wanted to I should have said that before we started. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. That's just part of part of the territory that comes with this medium. So no worries at all. Right.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to mention is that when I'm looking at different dimensions, the way I very simply look at it is that let's say that you have a cube, okay, a 3rd-dimensional cube, and you're on this top layer. Now, a lot of sacred geometry points to the idea that when you switch dimensions, there's a 90-degree aspect involved in the actual switching, and it's actually been observed in UFOs and how they move in the sky and then whoop, all of a sudden disappear. But this is something that Dronvala Melchizedek had mentioned back in the 80s and the early 90s. So on this cube, this is your first, let's say it's our waking plane of existence. If you were to go and somehow figure out how to make that right angle shift, you're now on another part of the block, but it's a different plane, unaware of the one you just came from, because all you can see is on that vertical field. You know what I mean? Of course, you know, in the real example, the block is much bigger with many more facets, but I think that's a good illustration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Chuck Bam, I think he was just trying to be funny, but he said, did wild trees have blood on his toilet paper the next day? Yeah, Chuck, I think you're just trying to be funny. But the thing is that I can say that what I went through during my abduction, the next day I had blood in my urine. And so it is kind of a serious question, you know. But
yeah, I wrote back that I think he's being funny too. But I think I didn't. I mean, it brings up the point whether I had any physical effects. So I don't remember any bruising or anything physical. But I will say, I mean, I don't know what happened. I'm not saying I was abducted. I'm just saying that's what I remember. But if I were to follow up with other abduction stories, then it does seem that perhaps I was about to be taken or abducted, or I had just been abducted. But
okay.
I don't have any evidence for any of those things happening. Yeah.
No memory.
Yeah, no memory.
Other than that.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, people sometimes try to make a distinction between poltergeist activity and perhaps having an extraterrestrial around you in some sort of spiritual form. This is still very, very new to the field in terms of a concept, although people have been talking about it, under wraps for a very long time. But this is something to pay attention to as the years come, because the veils are thinning. We've seen this over the last 20, 30 years, as it's been said to, be the case, even from many different people upcoming, that this was what was happening. And we can even see it today. It's easy to sit down and talk to the four of you about this, whereas 30 years ago, man, this would have been a lot different of an undertaking to even just get together in the same room and then be able to have the conversation. So
absolutely.
Let's see where things go, man. I think we're right at the cusp of something huge in terms of our consciousness on a collective level.
Yeah.
I had a question since we're talking about ETs, because you know what? I'm open to that possibility as well. Is it really extraterrestrial versus, and even some of the positive entities that we work with as well too, if you believe in ETs, there are benevolent ones out there as well. So I realize now, don't get me wrong, I don't accept everything that comes through. There's got to be a bit of science and find some research, or it's got to make some kind of sense to me. But I always say, you know what, just because I haven't heard of it or experienced it didn't mean it doesn't exist. But I've been hearing about this. There's Mike Cleland out there that has said that people that have had extraterrestrial abductions, and who knows, I'd love to see somebody study this with the paranormal. Maybe that might help us differentiate if it really is ET or it's paranormal. And where I'm going with this is he's done a lot of research that people that have either started to see UFOs or have missing time or possibly abductions start seeing owls everywhere.
I've heard that.
Precursor. You guys have heard of this before?
I've heard of this, yes.
Heard of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting theory.
The morning after my abduction, I woke up in my car, and when I woke up, I had no memory of this happening, but that anything had happened. But from my driver's side window, there was a fawn that was looking in at me, and then it saw me move and it darted off. But I've heard a lot of accounts like that where they're seeing things like deer and owls and stuff like that. It just happened once for me, but yeah, I've heard that it's repeated. Mike Hansen said something interesting. He said he just moved into a new place and he has a feeling of being watched and seeing shadows out of the corner of his eye. Mikey, I would say be careful with that. And the reason I say that is because you may want to surround yourself with some sort of protection, whether you pray or you just send it some love and light. And the reason I say that is because it's the same reason that a lot of people, especially when they're kids, they'll play around with things like Ouija boards, and they don't realize what they're getting into. And so I think methods of divination like that are kind of low frequency. And so unless you're surrounding yourself with some light and some good positive energy, who knows what you could be encouraging in your home if it's already there.
I also
opening the door.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I also wanted to give some advice for Mikey, I think was his name.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for really anybody who thinks they have problems in their house, okay? So I would get rid of the things that are like very practical or mundane first. Here's some examples. So it could be you have rats in the attic, or you have a possum living in the attic. I mean, you could just call in the attic. Yeah, the other thing was EMF,
yep.
or infrasound. Infrasound is sometimes given by a fan that's faulty or a light. So infrasound is a frequency of sound that can make you feel uneasy and scared. And so this could easily be fixed if you just fix the fan in your house or stuff like that. So those are some kind of small things I would want to do first before anything else, before I look at some more exotic explanations, because you might solve the problem right there.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is sobering. That is very sobering. It's something that everybody needs to hear, that thinks they want to look at the field or even have some sort of issue, with them. The only thing I would say to you, Mike, is, my personal thought is that if you're not acknowledging it right off the bat, you're not showing that there's any sort of threat. We don't know that it's a threat to you. You just feel a little uneasy right now. So yes, you could surround yourself with protection and do that for your own sense and sanity. But for the time being, my advice would be to just let it lay low. If you just moved into the house, there's a good chance whatever's there might just be scoping you out, saying, what's this person doing here? Who is this? It's not who was here before. See where you are in about a week or two. If the activity doesn't subside or if it increases, then I would suggest going a different direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the advice I have too is very similar to what Wild Trees and Dark Hours said, but that was my number one thing, is depending on how old the house is, what the wiring's like, and I would start. You don't need, like you said, you don't even have to interact, but maybe start documenting some things. Is there a specific time you're seeing this, or a specific room, or whatever? As well as, I love the advice that both Wild Trees and Dark Hour gave. I thought it was fantastic. But I always use an analogy with a Ouija board, and I don't know if this will help people out there or not, but a Ouija board's just a tool. Okay. And again, backing up to when I talked about energy and, everything on this planet is energy. So collectively, they already have that attachment that people have very negative thoughts and feelings. Not everybody, but a lot of people. So I liken it to the fact that because it's a tool, say somebody heard that a chainsaw was a really great thing to go cut a chain link fence down with. So they march over to the hardware store, have no clue what they're getting, happen to actually get a chainsaw, bring it home, toss the instructions over their shoulder, and somehow get the machine working. And then as soon as they go to cut the chainsaw, they are absolutely beyond shocked that it kicks back and cuts off their arm or their leg. That's kind of how I liken a Ouija board or any of these tools.
Right.
Have somebody enter you that knows what they're doing, can teach you, because when people play with stuff like that, you can open doorways and leave them open. You have no idea. Into. It just takes a little bit of care. And there are people out there that are very knowledgeable that will teach you how to open and close the session and, protect your energy, do all those kind of things. So I always like to put that out there, because as human beings, we're very, yin yang, cold, hot, white, black, night, day. There's always got to be an opposite to it, right? So I think you can sort of get a more holistic picture and information about, why are you using it? What are you doing with it? And the rules behind it, that, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative experience.
I have another question for you guys. Ralph and I did another episode on Black Lotus quite a while ago, It was about Ed and Lorraine Warren, those famous paranormal investigators, and they're the ones who did, the whole thing with Annabelle and several other ones. They also worked on the Amityville house, I guess. But my question is they thought that there were no hauntings. They thought everything was demonic activity.
That's not true.
Yeah, I don't know that I can get with that.
They also came from a very religious standpoint, which worked for them. And yet, I mean, I think there are some flaws in that approach today.
Right. I agree with you.
They were the pioneers, though. I mean, they had to, work with as much as they had at the time. And of course, they're going to make some assessments that, years later will be updated. That's a progression of the field, I think,
And I would say, not knowing much about Ed and Lorraine, other than the tidbit you just gave me, if they were like doing this as a job, or doing this constantly, like dealing with these kind of problems, it could be that they just simplified the process and they're like, hey, there's methods involved for getting rid of this, so let's just stick to one method. Maybe they did this unconsciously, but if you just say it's demons and you have your instructions down, and you just keep doing that, maybe it could simplify things for you. And like I said, a lot of the solutions seem to be the same. If you have this type of problem, it just seems to be finding peace, having a lot of love, and a lot of positivity. That seems to be.
Yeah, but if it's demonic and it's affecting people, right, or things like that, then we go a little bit more in a different direction, and there's a lot more involved with it. I hear what you're saying, and back then they were really brave pioneers to take this on. Nowadays, when you're going through something paranormal, and it's really extreme, you feel like you're the only ones out there. It's so isolating. It's not like you can stand in the grocery store line and start chit-chatting about the activity you're having in your house. You got to be very careful about who you talk to or what, right? Because there's a lot of people that don't believe. And then there's other people, because again, like I mentioned, it's a double-edged sword. I'm very grateful for the fact that paranormal is coming into mainstream media, but people, it's being put out there to be entertainment. That's not real life. Everything is not demonic. And
it was yeah. And I'm sorry, but it was kind of like the travel. You were saying about the Travel Channel when they did the expose on what you experienced. They tried to, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but kind of glamorize the thing or hype it up.
Right.
And like that one instance where they had you dancing like a puppet.
That didn't happen. Yeah,
that never happened, right?
I can't watch any more of it. Or really funny if you ever see this episode, you guys. We actually had a local female psychic. She was very good, but had no experience with the negative. It got a lot worse. She didn't want to be on the show, so they turned it into a male to protect her identity. And when they interview us, you'll hear me saying he. But when they do the reenactment, the person that's playing me, and she's super hyper and over the top. You don't speak to the actors that recreate. You don't speak to the psychics. It's really funny that Michelle DeRoche commented on that episode. Now I work with her at UPRN, so I didn't know her at the time. But long story short, when the local person comes and it's so cheesy, "Be gone, demon," and there's sound effects, and then when you watch, he runs out the door and slams the door. It's kind of like, "I'm out of here, biatch. You're on your own." Like, you have to see. Like, we could only watch it once or twice because it was so funny. Other people find it, scary, but it was funny the way it was done. We found.
I think we are going to get out of here for the night. But Lorilie, thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you for asking me. I'm thinking I'm going to hit these other two guys up. I have a podcast. I've had you guys on my podcast. I've had Damian. I'd love to have both of you on. I think we could have a great discussion. You're both very knowledgeable.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Since Ralph and I have been doing this, it blows my mind how tight-knit the paranormal community is, whether it's UFOs or cryptids or whatever, ghosts, whatever. It just amazes me that everybody seems to know everybody, and everybody knows GL Davies. I swear to God. He's
You're in
huge.
this long enough, you know what I mean? You talk to enough people, and the difference is that when you're in this field, when you're trying to reach somebody like maybe not necessarily Stephen Greer, but somebody else who's in that higher echelon of knowledge and research, I've found that most of them are very receptive to talking. Maybe that's because they don't have the distraction of mainstream media just pounding on their door like perhaps sports stars do.
Right.
But very, very nice and genuine people most of the time. Yeah, you're going to get your charlatans, and we call those guys out. But by and large, good people in the field.
Absolutely. But I think maybe since we still have some viewers on with us right now, I think maybe next week I'd like to focus on wild trees and get your take on cryptids. And I think that'll be an interesting show.
That sounds cool.
Absolutely.
But anyway, folks, thanks again for joining us, and we will be back next Sunday, same bat time, 8 o'clock Eastern and 5 o'clock Pacific. So until next time, keep thinking and question everything.
Thanks for having me on with you guys.
Good night.
Thank you.